Asha stirred awake in her small room. Asha was different. Not because she was cruel or careless. On the contrary, she was gentle and kind, with laughter that could make even the grumpiest elder smile. But in Tambira, kindness wasn't enough. Asha's body, large, curvaceous, soft, was treated like a flaw. The villagers saw her size as a burden, something to ridicule and judge. Asha is too big to marry, they whispered behind her back. No man will carry a wife who looks like a sack of millet, others snickered. Each insult chipped away at her confidence, and though Asha often pretended the words didn't hurt, her heart carried invisible scars. Every day she forced herself to rise with a brave face, performing her chores with quiet diligence. But inside, she longed to be seen for who she truly was, not just the size of her body. In her heart, Asha dreamed of a life beyond judgment, of love that didn't come with conditions. She often found herself gazing at the riverbank where the tall reeds swayed in the wind, imagining a world where someone might look at her the way they looked at the other girls in the village, with admiration, not pity or scorn. On this particular morning, as Asha tied her shawl around her shoulders, she whispered to herself, "Maybe today will be different." But deep down she knew better. She stepped out of her home, and the gossiping voices started almost immediately, as if her very presence gave them permission to spit their venom. "She's growing even bigger," said one of the women at the well, loud enough for Asha to hear. "Soon she won't fit through the door," another added, and they laughed together as if it were the funniest joke in the world. Asha clenched her fists, willing herself to stay calm. She couldn't let them see her break. Not today. But no matter how hard she tried, the words followed her like shadows she couldn't escape. They followed her to the market, where the vendors muttered behind her back. They followed her to the fields, where children pointed and laughed. And they followed her to the riverbank, her favorite place of peace, until even that sanctuary felt tainted by the weight of their mockery. It was on one such day at the river that Kofi found her. Kofi was unlike anyone else in the village. A quiet, thoughtful man who seemed to move through life with ease, as if nothing could touch him. He was tall and strong, with a kindness in his eyes that made people trust him. While others wasted their time gossiping, Kofi spent his days helping elders in the fields and dreaming of a better future for the village. He noticed Asha sitting alone by the water, her shoulders slumped with the weight of unspoken sorrow. Something about the way she stared at her reflection in the river moved him. There was a sadness in her eyes that reminded him of the rainy season, heavy, relentless, but beautiful in its own way. Kofi approached her slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Asha," he said gently, "do you mind if I sit here?" Asha looked up surprised. It wasn't often that people sought her company. She nodded, a little wary but grateful for the distraction. Kofi sat beside her, and for a long time they didn't speak. The river whispered between them, filling the silence with its soothing murmur. Finally, Kofi broke the silence. "You know, the river doesn't care what people think of it," he said. "It flows where it pleases, whether the reeds bend for it or not." Asha blinked, unsure of what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like this, like she mattered beyond what people saw on the surface. "Do you ever wonder," Kofi continued, "why people spend so much time talking about others? Perhaps it's because they fear looking at themselves." Asha smiled for the first time in what felt like days. There was something comforting about Kofi's words, like a balm on her wounded heart. For the first time in a long time she felt seen, not as an object of ridicule, but as a person with dreams, fears, and hopes. Over the next few weeks, Kofi and Asha began spending more time together. They met by the river at dusk, their conversations flowing as easily as the water. Asha found herself opening up to him in ways she never thought possible. She told him about her dreams of starting a bakery, where people could come not just for bread but for warmth and kindness. And Kofi shared his dream of building a school where every child, regardless of their background, could learn and grow. Their friendship blossomed like wildflowers after the rain, and with it, Asha's confidence began to grow. She started baking again, experimenting with new recipes that filled her home with the sweet scent of hope. And when the villagers laughed at her, she found that their words didn't cut as deeply as before. Kofi's belief in her acted as a shield, protecting her from the sharp edges of their cruelty. But not everyone in the village was pleased with their growing closeness. The same women who had mocked Asha before now whispered about Kofi behind his back. Why waste his time with her, they sneered. He could have any girl in the village, and he chooses her. The whispers reached Asha's ears, and doubt began to creep in. Was Kofi's kindness real, or was he just pitying her? The fear gnawed at her heart, threatening to undo all the progress she had made. One evening, as they sat by the river, Asha couldn't hold it in any longer. "Kofi," she whispered, "why do you spend time with me? Don't you care what people say?" Kofi turned to her, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Asha," he said softly, "people will always talk. But it's up to us whether we listen. I spend time with you because I see you, not the person they talk about but the real you. And that is all that matters." Tears welled in Asha's eyes, but this time they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, for Kofi, for his kindness, and for the possibility that she might finally be enough. Asha sat in silence after Kofi's words, her heart both heavy and light at the same time. Heavy because of the years she had spent believing she wasn't enough, and light because, for the first time, someone saw her as more than just her body. And yet, even with Kofi's kindness, doubt still lingered like a cloud that wouldn't clear. Could she truly let herself believe in something good? Could she allow herself to hope for a future with someone who saw beyond her appearance? But nothing in life, especially in Tambira, comes without a trial. One afternoon, as Asha was preparing a batch of warm maize bread for the evening market, Kofi's mother appeared at her doorstep. The elderly woman's face was stern, her sharp eyes full of disapproval. She didn't mince words. "Leave my son alone," she said flatly, arms crossed in front of her. "Do not think you can trap him with your kindness or your food. Kofi has a future, a bright one. And that future doesn't involve you." Asha stood frozen, her hands trembling over the dough. She tried to swallow the lump rising in her throat, but the old woman's words were like thorns lodged in her heart. Before she could respond, Kofi's mother leaned in, her voice low and threatening. "If you care about him at all, you'll let him go." The door slammed shut behind her, leaving Asha standing alone in the silence of her small kitchen. Her chest ached with the weight of 1,000 unsaid words. She knew the woman's warning wasn't an empty threat. The village would never approve of her being with Kofi, and his family would do everything in their power to pull him away. That night, Asha sat by the riverbank, tears streaming down her face. The moon hung low over the water, its pale light casting long shadows across the reeds. She didn't know what to do. Walking away from Kofi would break her heart, but staying with him might destroy his future. Could she live with herself knowing she was the reason his life became harder? As she wept, Kofi appeared out of the darkness, his tall frame illuminated by the moonlight. He knelt beside her, worry etched on his face. "Asha," he whispered, "what's wrong?" For a moment, Asha couldn't speak. She wanted to tell him everything. The visit from his mother, the hurtful words, the doubts that plagued her mind. But instead she shook her head. "It's nothing," she murmured, wiping her eyes. "It's just, the villagers. They'll never accept us, Kofi. And neither will your family." Kofi took her hands in his touch warm and steady. "Do you think I care what they think?" he asked gently. "Asha, I've spent my whole life trying to please people who will never be satisfied. But with you, for the first time I feel free. I don't want to lose that." His words filled Asha with both joy and fear. She wanted to believe in his love, but a voice in the back of her mind whispered that it wouldn't last. She had seen too many hearts broken, too many promises shattered. How could she be sure this was different? Days passed, and the tension in the village grew. Kofi's family pressured him to marry someone else, a slender, beautiful girl named Nia, whom the elders approved of. The villagers whispered about the match, convinced that Kofi would soon come to his senses and abandon Asha. Rumors spread like wildfire. "He'll leave her," they said with certainty. "It's only a matter of time." But Kofi didn't waver. He stayed by Asha's side, defying his family and the village. His love for her was like the river, constant, unwavering, and unbothered by the obstacles in its path. The more the villagers tried to push them apart, the closer they grew. One evening, the village elders summoned Kofi. They sat him down beneath the great baobab tree, their faces grim and serious. "You are bringing shame to your family," one elder said sternly. "A man of your standing should marry wisely. This attachment to Asha will lead only to disgrace." Kofi met their gaze without flinching. "I do not need your approval," he said firmly. "I love Asha, and that is enough." The elders exchanged uneasy glances, surprised by his defiance. In Tambira, it was rare for anyone to stand up to the authority of the elders, especially over a matter as serious as marriage. But Kofi's words were unyielding, like the roots of the baobab that ran deep into the earth. The news of Kofi's defiance spread through the village like wildfire. Some were shocked, others amused, but most were outraged. How could a man like Kofi, handsome, strong, and admired, choose Asha, the woman everyone had mocked for years? It didn't make sense to them, and people feared what they couldn't understand. One night, a group of young men, jealous of Kofi's devotion to Asha, decided to teach him a lesson. They ambushed him on his way home from the river, throwing insults and stones. "This is what you get for loving the fat girl," they shouted. Kofi fought back, but the odds were against him. By the time they left, bruised and battered, he was bleeding from a cut on his brow. Yet even as he lay on the ground, pain radiating through his body, his thoughts were only of Asha. When Asha found him later that night, her heart broke at the sight of him. She knelt beside him, cradling his head in her lap, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why do you do this, Kofi?" she whispered. "Why do you fight for me when the whole world is against us?" Kofi smiled despite the pain. "Because you are worth fighting for, Asha. And I would fight 1,000 battles just to see you smile." Asha's heart swelled with emotion, and in that moment she knew, without a doubt, that Kofi's love was real. It wasn't pity or obligation. It was something pure and true, something she had thought she would never find. The days that followed were not easy. The village didn't change overnight, and Kofi's family continued to oppose their relationship. But Asha and Kofi stood together, their love a beacon of light in the darkness. The villagers had gathered, their eyes fixed on the center of the clearing where 20-year-old black tall Kofi stood, radiating confidence. He cleared his throat, his heart pounding with the weight of what he was about to say. "Beloved friends and family," Kofi began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today we stand together not just as villagers but as a community united in spirit. I want to take a moment to talk about someone who means the world to us all. Someone we have too often overlooked." He paused, letting the murmurs of curiosity settle among the crowd. He glanced over at 20-year-old black woman Asha, who stood slightly to the side, her eyes wide with surprise and a hint of apprehension. "Asha, you've been the heart of our village, and today, I want to share a truth that has been too long buried under ignorance and fear." He took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the villagers' attention wash over him. "I remember the first time I met you. You were sitting by the river, laughter dancing in your eyes like sunlight on water. From that moment, I knew you were special, not just for your kindness but for the light you bring into every life you touch." The crowd listened intently, some nodding, while others exchanged glances filled with realization. "Yet, as we've gone through life together, I've watched you endure unthinkable pain and ridicule," Kofi continued, his voice rising with passion. "The jokes and whispers that followed you like a shadow, those were never reflections of who you truly are. They were projections of our fears and insecurities. The villagers who laughed did not see the beautiful heart behind your smile. They only saw the exterior." Kofi's voice trembled slightly, as he took a moment to gather his thoughts. "But today I stand here to tell you all that Asha is not defined by her size. She is defined by her spirit, her laughter, her boundless capacity for love. I've watched her care for the sick, share her food with those in need, and lift spirits even when her own were low. If love had a form, it would be Asha-sized. A ripple of applause ran through the crowd, but Kofi raised his hand for silence. Let us reflect, friends. When did we become so blind? When did we allow a number on a scale or the shape of a body to dictate our worth? We've laughed at her, mocked her, and pushed her away, all while she stood strong, her heart big enough to embrace each of us. Asha teaches us that true beauty lies within, in our actions, our kindness, and our compassion. She teaches us that every person deserves love, respect, and a place in our community. His voice grew stronger, fueled by the emotion in his heart. If we are to grow as a village, we must open our eyes and our hearts. We must not just see Asha for who she is, but for who she makes us all strive to be. Better, kinder, more loving. So, I ask you all today, will you stand with me? Will you choose to celebrate Asha for the incredible person she is, beyond the confines of her body? Tears welled up in Asha's eyes as she listened, the warmth of his words wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. Kofi continued, let us cast aside our judgments, our misconceptions, and embrace one another in our entirety. It is time for us to redefine what beauty means in our village. Asha, you are not alone. You are loved, you are cherished, and you are enough just as you are. With those words, Kofi looked deeply into Asha's eyes, a silent promise passing between them. The villagers erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the clearing, and in that moment, the weight of years of hurt began to lift, replaced by a powerful sense of unity and acceptance. And slowly, bit by bit, things began to shift. Some of the villagers, those who had once mocked Asha, started coming to her bakery, drawn by the warmth and kindness she offered. Children who had once teased her now smiled when they saw her, drawn to the sweetness of her spirit. Kofi's family, too, began to soften. They saw the joy Asha brought into Kofi's life, and though it wasn't easy, they started to accept her as one of their own. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale ending, but it was real, and that was enough. In the end, Asha and Kofi's love taught the village a powerful lesson, that true beauty lies not in appearances, but in the heart, and that love, real, honest love, is worth fighting for no matter the cost. Asha's bakery became a symbol of hope in Tambira, a place where people came not just for bread, but for a reminder that kindness and courage could change the world. And as the years passed, the whispers of ridicule faded, replaced by stories of a love that defied all odds. And Asha, she no longer saw herself as too much or not enough. She was exactly who she was meant to be, a woman of strength, beauty, and love. And that was more than enough.